One part, the problem of idle money, why keeping without multiplying is burying talents. Welcome to the Word on Wealth. Today, we embark on a profound exploration into the heart of biblical financial wisdom, beginning with a critical concept often misunderstood in our modern world, the problem of idle money. Many of us have been taught, either implicitly or explicitly, that keeping money safe, untouched, and uninvested is the most prudent financial strategy. We might hear sentiments like, "A penny saved is a penny earned," or "Don't take risks with your money." While responsible saving is indeed a virtue, there's a crucial distinction between wise saving for a specific purpose and allowing resources to lie fallow out of fear or ignorance. The common belief that idle money is inherently safe is, in many ways, a dangerous misconception. In fact, keeping money without multiplying it often mirrors the very behavior Jesus himself rebuked in one of his most striking parables. Let us turn our attention to the Gospel of Matthew in its 25th chapter, beginning at verse 14 and continuing through verse 30, the familiar parable of the talents. In this parable, a master entrusts his servants with varying sums of money or talents before departing on a long journey. One servant receives 5 talents, another 2, and the last 1 talent. Upon his return, the master calls for an accounting. The first servant, who received 5 talents, faithfully invests and doubles his money, presenting 10 talents to his master. The second, with 2 talents, does likewise, presenting 4. Both are commended with the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." However, the third servant, who received just 1 talent, responds differently. He confesses, "Master, I knew you to be a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you." His master's response is stark. "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest." And then the ultimate rebuke and consequence. "So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside, into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." This parable is not merely a story about financial management. It is a profound spiritual teaching on stewardship. It clearly and unequivocally rebukes stagnation. The master did not want his money to simply be returned in its original state. He expected it to be grown, to be multiplied. The servant who merely preserved his single talent without any attempt to grow it was condemned as wicked and lazy, not because he stole, but because he failed to leverage what was entrusted to him. His fear led to inaction, and inaction led to loss. Beyond the spiritual lesson, there's a powerful practical reality that underpins this parable: inflation's erosion of purchasing power. In our modern economy, keeping money idle, especially in a low-interest savings account, is effectively losing money over time. Inflation, the gradual increase in prices and the corresponding fall in the purchasing value of money, is a silent thief. If your money isn't growing at least at the rate of inflation, its real value is diminishing year after year. That 1 talent, buried in the ground, would not have bought the same amount of goods or services years later as it would have on the day it was buried. It would have lost value. The Bible millionaire mindset understands that God expects stewardship, not stagnation. It's not about being a billionaire for personal gain, but about being a diligent manager of the resources God has entrusted to us. This mindset recognizes that every resource, whether it's 1 talent or 5, is a seed meant to be planted and grown. It's about maximizing potential, not minimizing risk to the point of paralysis. It challenges us to move beyond fear-based preservation to faith-filled multiplication. Therefore, the problem of idle money is twofold. It directly contravenes a clear biblical principle of stewardship, and it allows the insidious force of inflation to diminish the very resources we believe we are protecting. Our financial journey must begin with an understanding that God desires us to be active, wise, and diligent stewards, leveraging every gift and resource for His glory and for the benefit of His kingdom. This foundational truth sets the stage for every subsequent secret we will explore. Part 2. 2 eternal choices. Enrich others or build your own legacy. In our previous discussion, we established the crucial biblical principle that idle money is a wasted opportunity, a buried talent in the eyes of God. Now we delve deeper into the active deployment of our resources, confronting a fundamental truth. Every spending or investing decision you make is, in essence, a vote. It's a vote cast either to enrich someone else's empire, to fuel their vision, to build their legacy, or to strategically build your own lasting legacy and contribute to God's kingdom. This profound realization shifts our financial perspective from mere transaction to intentional impact. Consider this. When you purchase goods or services, you are transferring your wealth to the merchant, the company, the entrepreneur. You are supporting their business, contributing to their profits, and helping them expand their reach. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. Commerce is essential. However, if every single dollar you acquire immediately flows out to support external entities without any portion being strategically retained and grown for your own future or for kingdom purposes, then you are perpetually building other people's kingdoms, not your own. Your financial life becomes a continuous cycle of consumption, enriching others while your own financial future remains stagnant or precarious. This cycle is often driven by the allure of instant gratification. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with messages encouraging immediate consumption, quick fixes, and the fleeting pleasure of new possessions. This stands in stark contrast to the patient, disciplined approach of building a lasting legacy. The book of Proverbs, in its 21st chapter, verse 20, offers a timeless insight. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. This verse vividly illustrates the difference between those who plan for the future, building reserves and growing resources, and those who consume everything in the present moment, leaving nothing for tomorrow. The foolish man, driven by instant gratification, devours all he has, ensuring a future of scarcity. The wise man, conversely, practices foresight, saving and investing for a secure future and the ability to give generously. The challenge, therefore, is to discern between the fleeting satisfaction of immediate consumption and the enduring power of long-term investment. Investment, whether in financial assets, in skills, in relationships, or in your spiritual growth, requires patience. It demands a willingness to delay gratification for a greater, more sustainable reward. It's about planting seeds today, knowing that the harvest may not come until tomorrow, next year, or even decades down the road. This brings us to a critical distinction that shapes our financial destiny. Spending without vision is the wide road that leads to slavery. Investing with wisdom is the narrow road that leads to freedom. Let's unpack this. Spending without vision is characterized by impulse, by emotional reactions to advertising, by a constant pursuit of more without a clear purpose. It leads to accumulating liabilities rather than assets, to living paycheck to paycheck, and often to the crushing burden of debt. This is the wide road because it's the path of least resistance, the default setting in a consumer-driven society. It promises immediate comfort and pleasure, but ultimately delivers financial bondage and limits our future choices. It enslaves us to our desires, to our creditors, and to the endless cycle of needing more just to keep up. This cycle is often driven by the allure of instant gratification. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with messages encouraging immediate consumption, quick fixes, and the fleeting pleasure of new possessions. This stands in stark contrast to the patient, disciplined approach of building a lasting legacy. The book of Proverbs, in its 21st chapter, verse 20, offers a timeless insight. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. This verse vividly illustrates the difference between those who plan for the future, building reserves and growing resources, and those who consume everything in the present moment, leaving nothing for tomorrow. The foolish man, driven by instant gratification, devours all he has, ensuring a future of scarcity. The wise man, conversely, practices foresight, saving, and investing for a secure future and the ability to give generously. The challenge, therefore, is to discern between the fleeting satisfaction of immediate consumption and the enduring power of long-term investment. Investment, whether in financial assets, in skills, in relationships, or in your spiritual growth, requires patience. It demands a willingness to delay gratification for a greater, more sustainable reward. It's about planting seeds today, knowing that the harvest may not come until tomorrow, next year, or even decades down the road. This brings us to a critical distinction that shapes our financial destiny. Spending without vision is the wide road that leads to slavery. Investing with wisdom is the narrow road that leads to freedom. Let's unpack this. Spending without vision is characterized by impulse, by emotional reactions to advertising, by a constant pursuit of more without a clear purpose. It leads to accumulating liabilities rather than assets, to living paycheck to paycheck, and often to the crushing burden of debt. This is the wide road because it's the path of least resistance, the default setting in a consumer-driven society. It promises immediate comfort and pleasure, but ultimately delivers financial bondage and limits our future choices. It enslaves us to our desires, to our creditors, and to the endless cycle of needing more just to keep up. Conversely, investing with wisdom is a deliberate, purposeful act. It is guided by foresight, by biblical principles of stewardship, and by a clear understanding of your long-term goals. It involves making conscious choices to forego some immediate pleasures in favor of building a solid financial foundation, multiplying your resources, and creating a legacy that extends beyond your lifetime. This is the narrow road because it often requires discipline, sacrifice, and a willingness to go against the prevailing cultural tide of instant gratification. However, it is precisely this narrow road that leads to true financial freedom. The freedom to live abundantly, to give generously, and to serve God's purposes without the constraints of debt or scarcity. Every dollar you hold is a powerful tool. You can wield it unconsciously, allowing it to slip away, enriching others while you remain on the wide road to financial struggle, or you can grasp it with intention, directing it to build your legacy, to invest wisely, and to walk the narrow road to lasting freedom and impact. The choice in every financial decision is eternally yours. Part 3. God rewards faithfulness in small beginnings. In our discussion about the choices we make with our money, whether to enrich others or build our own legacy, a critical question often arises. But what if I only have a small amount to start with? How can I possibly build a legacy or invest wisely if my resources are so limited? This is precisely where one of God's most encouraging and foundational principles comes into play. It is a truth that empowers us to begin exactly where we are, with whatever we have, and trust in divine multiplication. The Gospel of Luke, in its 16th chapter, verse 10, provides this profound insight. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. This verse is a bedrock principle for financial stewardship, revealing God's economy of trust. It unequivocally teaches us that faithfulness in managing the smallest resources is the prerequisite, the training ground for being entrusted with greater wealth and responsibility. Think about this deeply. God is not looking for the size of your initial capital. He is examining the posture of your heart and the diligence of your hands with what you currently possess. If you demonstrate integrity, wisdom, and discipline in managing, let's say, $200, then you are proving yourself worthy of managing $2,000, $20,000, or even $2 million. The principles of budgeting, saving, investing, and giving remain the same, regardless of the numerical value. The habits you cultivate with a little are the very habits that will sustain you with much. Consider the powerful idea that faithfulness with, for example, $200 is the essential training ground for greater wealth. If you consistently budget, save 10%, give 10%, and strategically invest even a small portion of that $200, you are building muscle memory. You are developing the character traits of discipline, patience, and generosity that are indispensable for managing larger sums. Without this training, sudden wealth can often be a curse, leading to irresponsible spending and ultimately to loss. Many lottery winners sadly can attest to this. They were entrusted with much but lacked the foundational faithfulness in little. A compelling biblical example that illustrates this principle is found in the first book of Kings, chapter 17, with the story of the widow of Zarephath and her jar of oil. The prophet Elijah comes to her during a severe famine, asking for bread and water. The widow replies that she has only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug, just enough for one last meal for herself and her son before they die. Yet, when Elijah, speaking God's word, tells her to first make him a small cake from what she has, promising that the jar of flour will not be used up and the jug of oil will not run dry until the Lord sends rain, she obeys. She acts in faith with her very little. And, true to God's promise, the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, according to the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. This story is a magnificent illustration of God rewarding faithfulness and obedience with the little. The widow wasn't asked to produce a feast. She was asked to give from her meager resources. Her consistency in trusting God with her very little led to a miraculous sustained provision. Her obedience with what seemed insignificant led to supernatural abundance. We also see this principle echoed in countless personal testimonies. I have heard stories of individuals who started with incredibly humble means, a few dollars saved from a minimum wage job, a small inheritance, or a tiny side hustle. But because they were faithful with that very little, consistently saving, consistently tithing, consistently investing even modest sums, they eventually built significant wealth. Their progress wasn't driven by the size of their initial capital, but by the consistency of their disciplined actions and their unwavering faith in God's principles. God is not intimidated by the smallness of your beginnings. In fact, He often delights in starting there, so that His power and faithfulness are undeniably evident in your growth. Your call is not to generate vast sums immediately, but to demonstrate faithfulness with whatever He has placed in your hands right now. Begin where you are. Be consistent. Be faithful. Trust that God will honor your diligence and multiply your little into much for His glory and your abundance. Part 4. What the market really is. Companies as instruments of stewardship. Having understood that God rewards faithfulness in small beginnings, our next step is to demystify one of the most powerful arenas for multiplying those small beginnings, the market. For many, the stock market conjures images of chaotic trading floors, complex algorithms, or even outright gambling. This perception often leads to fear and avoidance, causing many to miss out on a vital tool for stewardship and wealth creation. Let us strip away the jargon and the sensationalism. At its core, the stock market is simply a collection of businesses. When you buy a share of stock, you are not merely buying a fluctuating number on a screen, you are purchasing a small fractional ownership in a real operating company. You become a part owner of a business that produces goods, provides services, employs people, and ideally generates profits. Consider the timeless wisdom found in the book of Proverbs, in its 27th chapter, verse 23. Be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. While this passage speaks of literal livestock, its underlying principle is profoundly relevant to our understanding of investment. It exhorts us to be diligent in understanding and caring for our assets. In today's economy, our flocks and herds often take the form of financial assets, including shares in companies. True stewardship requires us to understand what we own, why we own it, and how it is performing. Therefore, we must learn to view our investments not as mere speculative plays, but as partnerships and acts of stewardship. When you invest in a company, you are partnering with its management, its employees, and its mission. You are entrusting your capital to them, expecting them to manage it wisely and generate a return. This perspective transforms investing from a purely transactional activity into a profound act of responsible ownership. It moves beyond simply hoping for a good return. It involves considering the ethical foundation, the societal impact, and the long-term viability of the businesses you choose to support with your capital. This leads us to the crucial concept of biblically responsible investing, or BRI. BRI is not just about avoiding sin stocks like alcohol or gambling companies, though that is certainly a part of it. More broadly, it's about proactively seeking out and investing in companies that align with biblical values, companies that treat their employees fairly, that serve their communities, that operate with integrity, and that produce goods and services that bless humanity rather than harm it. It's about leveraging your ownership to encourage corporate behavior that reflects the character of God. This approach recognizes that your money has moral weight and that your investments can be a powerful force for good in the world. The shift in mindset is profound. It encourages you to become an owner, not just a consumer. Most of us are well versed in being consumers. We buy goods and services every day. But how many of us consciously think about becoming owners? The book of Deuteronomy, in its 28th chapter, verse 13, speaks of God's desire for his people. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. While this verse has broad application, in a financial context, becoming an owner represents moving towards being the head, having agency, influence, and the potential for long-term growth and leadership, rather than perpetually being the tail that merely consumes. When you become an owner, you shift from simply being a recipient of products to being a participant in the creation of value. You move from passively paying others to actively building wealth for yourself, your family, and for God's kingdom. This is not about greed. It is about embracing the mandate of stewardship, understanding the true nature of wealth creation, and strategically deploying your resources to multiply them for a higher purpose. The market, when understood through a biblical lens, ceases to be a mysterious, risky game and instead becomes a powerful, ethical instrument for stewardship and for serving God's greater plan. Part 5. Risk, Faith, and Wisdom. Balancing trust in God with planning. As we delve into the nature of the market and our role as owners and stewards, the concept of risk inevitably arises. For many, the very word risk triggers apprehension, leading to paralysis and the avoidance of any investment opportunity. However, from a biblical perspective, risk is not something to be entirely avoided, but rather something to be managed wisely, integrated into a larger framework of faith and planning. The Scriptures provide numerous examples of wise risk management. Consider the iconic story of Joseph in the grain storage in the book of Genesis, chapter 41. Pharaoh had a dream, interpreted by Joseph, foretelling 7 years of abundant harvest followed by 7 years of severe famine. Joseph, acting on divine wisdom, didn't simply pray and hope for the best. He proactively advised Pharaoh to implement a strategic plan. Collect 1/5 of the produce during the years of abundance and store it as a reserve for the coming famine. This was a monumental act of managing future risk through present planning and action. Joseph understood that while God reveals the future, he also expects his people to act wisely and prudently in response. This wasn't about avoiding the famine, but preparing for it, mitigating its impact through forethought and diligent execution. The Christian walk is inherently one of faith, and faith often involves stepping into the unknown. Yet biblical faith is never reckless. It is always tempered with wisdom. We are called to contrast recklessness with diversification. The book of Ecclesiastes, in its 11th chapter, verse 2, advises us, "Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on earth." This ancient wisdom is a profound call for diversification and investment. It warns against putting all your resources into a single venture, recognizing the inherent uncertainties of life. Spreading your investments across different assets, sectors, or even geographies is a practical expression of this biblical principle, reducing your exposure to any single point of failure and thus managing risk wisely. It's not a lack of faith to diversify, it is a demonstration of prudent stewardship and an acknowledgement of human fallibility and unpredictability. It is also vital to understand that the market, with its inevitable cycles of ups and downs, serves a deeper purpose in our spiritual formation. Market downturns, while financially challenging, are powerful tests of character. They force us to confront our fears, our patience, and the true foundation of our trust. The Apostle James, in his first letter, chapter 1, verse 3, reminds us, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." In the same way, the testing of our financial discipline and our investment philosophy during periods of market volatility produces perseverance, strengthens our resolve, and refines our understanding of true wealth. Do we panic and abandon our long-term plan, or do we stand firm, trusting in the principles we have established and the God who guides us? These moments reveal whether our trust is truly in God or in the fleeting performance of our portfolios. Therefore, the key is to align our risk management with God's wisdom for growth without fear. This means that 1. God expects us to be active stewards, not passive observers. 2. Prudent planning and diversification are expressions of wisdom, not a lack of faith. 3. Challenges and downturns are opportunities for spiritual growth and a deeper reliance on Him. We are called to be courageous, but not foolish, to be faithful, but not reckless, to invest with purpose, understanding that while we do our part in planning and diversifying, our ultimate security rests in the sovereign hands of God. By embracing this balanced perspective on risk, we can confidently engage with the market, aiming for growth and impact, free from the paralyzing grip of fear, knowing that our ultimate hope is in Christ, not in our returns. This is the essence of aligning our financial journey with divine wisdom. Part 6. The Power of Small Beginnings. 100 today can be the seed for tomorrow's harvest. We have journeyed through the perils of idle money, the choices we make with our resources, and the critical role of faithfulness in managing even the smallest amounts. Now, let us bring these threads together with a powerful truth that often goes overlooked in our pursuit of grand outcomes: the extraordinary power of small beginnings. This concept is not merely a comforting thought. It is a fundamental principle of growth, both spiritual and financial, woven throughout Scripture and evident in the natural world. The prophet Zechariah, in its 4th chapter, verse 10, offers a profound encouragement. For who has despised the day of small things? This rhetorical question carries a powerful challenge to our often short-sighted and impatient human nature. We live in a culture that celebrates instantaneous success, monumental achievements, and overnight fortunes. This can lead us to dismiss or even despise the seemingly insignificant efforts we make each day. Yet, God's economy often operates on a different timetable, valuing consistency, patience, and the cumulative effect of small, faithful actions. Let us consider a practical demonstration of this principle. Imagine beginning with a modest investment, perhaps just $200, and consistently adding $200 each month. It might not sound like much in the grand scheme of things. However, when we harness the incredible force of compounding, these small, consistent investments can blossom into substantial wealth over time. For example, if you consistently invest $200 per month at a conservative average annual return of 8%, after just 20 years, your initial $200 plus your consistent monthly contributions would have grown to over $116,000. Extend that to 30 years, and that same $200 a month could easily exceed $280,000. If you started earlier and continued for 40 years, you could be looking at well over $650,000, all from consistent $200 monthly contributions. The true magic here isn't the size of the initial contribution. It's the consistent act of planting small seeds, allowing time and compound interest to work their transformative wonder. This is the financial equivalent of "do not despise these small beginnings." Jesus himself taught this principle through the parable of the growing seed found in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verses 26 and 27. He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, The seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. The farmer does not understand the intricate biological processes, yet he trusts that the seed, once planted, will grow. He performs the small, consistent action of sowing, and nature, by God's design, does the rest. Similarly, with our finances, we plant the seeds through consistent saving and investing, and the miracle of compound interest works its magic over time, even as we go about our daily lives. Crucially, these small actions do more than just grow our money. They build discipline and vision. Every time you consciously choose to save, to invest, to give, or to budget, you are exercising financial discipline. You are reinforcing positive habits. These repeated actions, however small, cultivate a mindset of foresight, patience, and intentionality. They sharpen your vision for the future, moving you away from instant gratification and towards long-term legacy building. The person who consistently saves $20 each week is developing the same foundational discipline as the person saving $200 each month. The scale may differ, but the spiritual and financial muscles being built are identical. So, do not let the seemingly small size of your current resources deter you. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. Recognize that every dollar, every decision, every consistent effort is a seed. Plant it with faith, water it with discipline, and trust that God, in His infinite wisdom, will bring forth a bountiful harvest, not just in financial terms, but in character, wisdom, and the ability to bless others. Your financial journey, no matter how humble its start, holds the potential for profound growth and impact. Part 7. Biblical Rules of Financial Management, Emergency Fund, and Long-Term Vision. As we embrace the power of small beginnings and the wisdom of investing, it is absolutely essential to ground our financial journey in sound biblical principles of management. Without a solid foundation, even the most promising investments can crumble under unexpected pressures. Therefore, let us outline 2 foundational rules that will guide our path: establishing an emergency fund and maintaining a clear long-term vision. The first critical step in wise financial management is to separate short-term safety from long-term growth. Many people make the mistake of immediately pouring all available funds into investments, eager for returns, without first securing their immediate financial well-being. This approach, while well-intentioned, often backfires when life inevitably throws unforeseen challenges our way. The book of Proverbs, in its 21st chapter, verse 5, offers a foundational insight. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Diligence in planning includes preparing for contingencies. This preparation manifests most practically in the form of an emergency fund. An emergency fund is simply a dedicated savings account separate from your regular checking or investment accounts holding readily accessible cash. Its sole purpose is to provide a financial cushion for unexpected events such as job loss, medical emergencies, major car repairs, or home maintenance issues. Without this buffer, these unexpected costs often derail investment plans, force individuals into debt, or compel them to liquidate long-term assets at inopportune times. The timeless example of Joseph's storehouse, which we revisited earlier in Genesis chapter 41, serves as a paramount model for preparing for unexpected events. Joseph's wisdom was not merely to accumulate grain, but to store it specifically for the lean years that were certain to come. He didn't immediately sell off all the surplus grain to fund other ventures. He preserved a significant portion as a hedge against future adversity. In the same way, your emergency fund is your personal storehouse, a strategic reserve designed to carry you through your own lean years or sudden crises. It is a fundamental act of prudent stewardship, preparing for the known unknowns of life before embarking on riskier long-term growth strategies. The recommended size for an emergency fund typically ranges from 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses. For those with less stable income or larger families, even 12 months might be advisable. The key is to have enough liquid cash to cover your basic needs without having to go into debt or touch your investments. Once this short-term safety net is firmly in place, then and only then should you begin to seriously consider higher-risk long-term investments. This establishes a clear and essential rhythm: protect first, then invest. This sequence is not just practical, it aligns with biblical principles of foresight and responsible planning. It ensures that your journey towards financial growth is built upon a secure foundation rather than on the shifting sands of immediate gratification or unpreparedness. By establishing an emergency fund, you achieve several critical outcomes. 1. You gain immense peace of mind knowing you are prepared for most financial shocks. 2. You protect your long-term investments from being prematurely sold during a downturn or crisis. 3. You avoid unnecessary debt, preserving your financial freedom. This dual focus, securing your short-term safety through an emergency fund and then building your long-term vision through strategic investment, is a hallmark of wise stewardship. It demonstrates faith in God's provision while actively engaging in responsible planning. It is a powerful way to manage your resources, honoring God with both your prudence and your pursuit of growth. Part 8. A call to action. Don't be among the 100 million unprepared. We've explored profound biblical truths about stewardship, the market, managing risk, and the power of small beginnings. Now it's time for a direct and urgent call to action. The principles we have discussed are not merely academic exercises, they are blueprints for a life of financial freedom, purpose, and blessing. However, far too many people remain stuck in a cycle of inaction, fear, or simply a lack of preparedness. Consider this sobering statistic. Numerous studies indicate that a significant percentage of people, often over 100 million in countries like the United States, lack even a basic emergency fund or a coherent financial plan. This means they are living on the precipice, one unexpected event away from financial crisis. This state of unpreparedness is not merely a secular statistic. It mirrors a biblical warning. Jesus' parable of the 10 virgins in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, offers a powerful spiritual parallel. 5 of the virgins were wise and brought extra oil for their lamps, preparing for a potentially long wait for the bridegroom. 5 were foolish, bringing no extra oil, and when the bridegroom was delayed, their lamps ran out. When they finally went to buy more oil, they missed the wedding feast. This parable is a stark reminder about the consequences of unpreparedness and the critical importance of foresight. In our financial lives, lacking an emergency fund or a long-term plan is akin to being one of the foolish virgins, unprepared for the inevitable delays, downturns, and unexpected demands of life. However, we are not left without hope or ability. The book of Deuteronomy, in its 8th chapter, verse 18, provides a magnificent truth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, that He may confirm His covenant which He swore to your fathers, as it is this day. God doesn't just want us to survive, He gives us the very ability, the skill, the intellect, the opportunities, and the resources to produce wealth. This ability is a gift intended to confirm His covenant, to demonstrate His faithfulness, and to empower us to be channels of His blessing. Therefore, my friends, I challenge you, stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect market conditions, for a larger paycheck, or for life to feel less chaotic. The perfect time rarely arrives. The best time to start is now, with what you have, where you are. Stop doubting. Stop doubting your capacity to learn, to grow, and to manage your resources wisely. God has given you the ability. Embrace it. He will guide your steps as you seek His wisdom. And, crucially, stop burying your talents. Remember the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25, where the servant who buried his 1 talent out of fear was condemned. We have been entrusted with resources, abilities, and opportunities. To bury them, to let them lie idle out of fear or inaction, is to dishonor the giver. Instead, let us honor the gift of multiplication through immediate action. Take that $200, or even $50, or even just $10, and start. Begin by creating that emergency fund. Begin by researching biblically responsible investment options. Begin by setting up a consistent monthly savings contribution, however small. The act of starting, even with a tiny seed, is an act of faith, an act of stewardship, and a declaration that you are willing to partner with God in cultivating the resources He has entrusted to you. Do not be among the unprepared. Choose today to be among the wise. Choose to engage with God's principles of wealth and stewardship and watch as He multiplies your efforts for His glory and for your abundant life. The journey begins with one intentional step. Take it now. Part 9. Your test of trust and obedience. What will you do with your $200? Throughout this message, we have explored profound truths about our financial lives, from the sacred nature of money to the power of compounding. We have seen how biblical principles guide us toward wise stewardship, responsible investing, and the cultivation of a long-term vision. Now, as we draw to a close, we arrive at a moment of decision. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is a personal challenge. The question before you is simple, yet incredibly profound. What will you do with your $200? Or perhaps it's $50, or even just $10. The amount itself is not the ultimate point, it is the principle behind it. Will you allow that money to sleep in a low-interest checking account, slowly eroding in value due to inflation, merely representing idle potential? Or will you, with intentionality and faith, choose to plant it in good soil, setting it on a path of growth and multiplication? This choice is not just about financial gain. It is fundamentally a test of your trust and obedience. Remember the parable of the talents. The servant who received 1 talent chose to bury it, effectively allowing it to sleep, and was condemned for his inaction and fear. The master expected growth, stewardship, and a return on his investment. In our lives, our resources, however modest, are talents entrusted to us by God. Our response to these talents reveals the depth of our trust in His principles and our obedience to His call for diligent stewardship. Faithfulness with little is the crucible in which our character is refined and our capacity for greater responsibility is proven. Jesus Himself said in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verse 10, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." This applies directly to our finances. If we are faithful in managing our $200, our $500, or our $1,000 with wisdom and purpose, we demonstrate our readiness for the greater responsibilities and blessings God may entrust to us. Our current financial state is not an excuse for inaction. It is the proving ground for our faithfulness. True legacy is built not by accumulating vast sums of money through reckless means, but by consistently aligning our ordinary money with God's extraordinary wisdom. It is in the small, consistent decisions, the decision to save, to invest, to give, to avoid unnecessary debt, that we lay the groundwork for a future of abundance and impact. Your $200, when consistently and wisely planted, can become the seed for your emergency fund, the beginning of your long-term investment portfolio, or a significant contribution to a cause that impacts eternity. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the values and principles you embed into your financial DNA. So, I issue this challenge to you directly. Act today for a transformed future. Don't let this message be just another inspiring thought that fades with time. Let it be the catalyst for concrete action. If you don't have an emergency fund, start one with whatever you can spare. If you have idle money, investigate biblically responsible investing options. If you've been procrastinating, commit to a consistent monthly investment, however small. Pray for wisdom, seek counsel, and then take that first step. Your future self, your family, and ultimately God will be honored by your obedience and diligent stewardship. The choice is yours. What will you do with your $200? Having explored the practical steps and biblical wisdom for managing our finances, we arrive at the most pivotal moment, a declaration for financial transformation. All the principles we have discussed, from recognizing God's ownership to embracing the power of small beginnings, culminate in this profound statement of faith. This is where intellectual understanding transforms into heartfelt commitment and actionable trust. I invite you, sincerely and wholeheartedly, to consider making this declaration. either silently in your heart or even more powerfully aloud. I trust God with every dollar I have. Let the weight of those words settle upon you. This is not merely an affirmation, it is a profound realignment of your entire financial posture. It is a spiritual act that has the power to shift the very course of your business, your personal finances, and your entire approach to wealth. When you declare, I trust God with every dollar I have, you are acknowledging a fundamental truth articulated in the book of Psalms, chapter 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. You are releasing your grip of anxious ownership and surrendering to the divine truth that God is the ultimate owner, and you are simply a steward. This shift in perspective is liberating. It moves you from a place of fear, scarcity, and self-reliance to one of peace, abundance, and dependence on a faithful God. This powerful declaration shifts the course of your business and finances in several critical ways. First, it transforms your decision-making. When you truly trust God with every dollar, your choices are no longer solely driven by the pursuit of personal gain or the avoidance of loss. Instead, they become guided by wisdom, integrity, and a desire to honor God. You begin to ask different questions. How can this investment serve a greater purpose? Is this expenditure aligned with God's values? How can my business practices reflect Christ-like character? This leads to more ethical decisions, more generous giving, and a greater willingness to take wise, faithful risks, knowing your ultimate security rests in Him. Second, it redefines your relationship with market fluctuations. When you trust God with your money, market downturns, while still challenging, do not become sources of paralyzing anxiety. Your ultimate hope is not in your portfolio's performance, but in the unwavering faithfulness of God. As the Apostle Paul writes in his first letter to Timothy, chapter 6, verse 17, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. This declaration helps you anchor your hope in the provider, not the provision. Third, it aligns your financial journey with God's purpose for your legacy and destiny. God doesn't just want us to be financially stable. He desires us to be channels of His blessing, leaving a lasting impact that extends beyond our own lives. When you trust Him with every dollar, your financial resources become tools in His hands. You begin to see your wealth, your business, and your investments not merely as means for personal comfort, but as opportunities to fund His kingdom, to support ministries, to care for the vulnerable, and to advance the gospel. This leads to a legacy that is not just material, but eternal. Your financial story becomes intertwined with God's grand narrative of redemption and restoration. This declaration is not a magic incantation that instantly makes all financial problems disappear. Rather, it is an act of spiritual surrender that empowers you to engage with your finances from a place of strength, faith, and divine wisdom. It opens the door for God to work in and through your financial life in ways you cannot even imagine. So, once more, I invite you, take a deep breath, and with conviction in your heart, declare, I trust God with every dollar I have. Let this truth resonate deep within you. Let it guide your next decision, your next investment, your next act of generosity. Embrace this declaration and watch as your financial life, aligned with God's purpose, transforms not just your present, but your eternal legacy.